Welcome back, everyone, to Delta Y. This week we'll be talking about
a new pill developed by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that can deliver insulin through the stomach.
and a fabric developed by the University of Maryland that can automatically cool or insulate depending on the conditions. As always, I'm Josh.
This is Grayson, and welcome to Delta Y. So, the first article we're going to be talking about today is a new pill developed by MIT that can deliver insulin through the stomach. So, researchers have developed a drug capsule that is able to deliver oral doses of insulin, potentially replacing the injections that patients need to help with their type 2 diabetes. So, MIT-led research team has developed a drug capsule that has these tiny little pods inside of them. They basically look kind of.
They look kind of like a space capsule you'd think of for a crew, like the old the ones that would go to the moon,
like old Apollo capsules, or kind of
like the top part of the Dragon 2 capsule.
Yeah, something like that. So basically, they have a spring and needle system inside them, which is held back by a sugar disc. Kind of interesting that they're using a sugar disc.
Well, I mean, it's the best method, I think, that, it's not a harmful thing. It can just kind of dissolve, and the stomach will just take that right up.
Well, I just kind of find it interesting that they use that for an application in insulin and deployment. But anyway, so...
Well, there are lots of types of sugar, so it could be anything, really.
True, but it's still sugar that has to get processed, and it's going to be inside the bloodstream. But anyway, the disc, once dissolved, it allows for a needle and spring system to attach itself to the stomach lining and inject directly into the surrounding blood vessels surrounding the stomach. It allows it to inject insulin directly into the stomach lining. This, to me, actually seems like a relatively, I think, almost revolutionary kind of change in a shift from larger plastic materials like larger insulin injection, like needles and syringes, to something more compact that could be used every day that would actually be able to benefit a lot better in terms of cost effectiveness.
I agree. I mean, this is something that seems almost more environmentally friendly because you wouldn't have all the waste from insulin casing. Like, usually people with, type 2 diabetes, they'll have cases, they'll have their insulin needles, they'll have syringes, they'll have capsules for the insulin. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of stuff to haul around on a daily basis. And I mean, this kind of thing is much more interesting to me because you're going to reduce the amount of needles you're making, the amount of plastics you're using. Everything's going to be reduced. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, you're still going to need all the insulin, but, I mean, the cost of materials seems like it would go down with this.
Yeah, that plus, like you were saying, with the amount of materials that people are going to require to carry. I mean, imagine having to carry around like 3 or 4, I don't know how many syringes a normal diabetic carries on them on a daily basis, but even just 2 syringes, I could imagine, or even an insulin pump management system would require a heck of a lot of space. Mm-hmm. Just replacing those with a little, like, 2x5 row or like array
even just a pill bottle.
Yeah, even just a pill bottle. You could just carry that around, or just a little packet of pills that you could just pop one in if you're feeling symptoms of type 2 diabetes. That would be almost like, that just seems crazy to me that we're able to compact this down almost completely.
And I will say they don't mention the processing time. So I mean, obviously insulin needle, it's relatively quick, it's there. Mm-hmm. But this you're going to have to swallow it. It's going to have to get to your stomach lining. I'd imagine it would take too long. They're small. They'd probably fall right down the esophagus.
Well, it depends on how long it takes for the sugar disc itself to digest, because that's the limiting mechanism for the spring and needle system to inject itself. So you'd have to swallow it. The pill automatically writes itself, because there was an earlier version of it that had multiple tinier needles that were around this kind of pod, and that would actually inject part of the insulin inside the stomach rather than on the stomach or on the stomach lining, and it would digest the insulin instead of injecting it into the bloodstream, making it useless. Mm-hmm. But this newer one allows it to write itself, almost like its center of mass is kind of higher up on the pill or on the, like, the dosage, or the, I guess, how would you describe it, like the pod?
The pod. Yeah, and they based it off of, they were talking about a leopard tortoise, which is found in Africa, which has, like, it's the one, the tortoise, I've probably seen a lot of photos of it. It's the one with, like, the really steep shell.
I have not heard. What is this called?
It's a leopard tortoise. So essentially, it's got a high, like, steep dome-type shell. Mm-hmm. So if it rolls over, it can roll right back over.
Interesting.
So it doesn't come with the fallacy of most North American tortoises where they roll over and they're dead.
Yeah.
It's going to roll over, and it can roll right back over just by kind of shifting its body weight inside of its shell.
That's an
So what this
development.
allows is that, like, if the person's moving or if the stomach grumbles or stuff like that, it will still keep its orientation in reference to the stomach, because it might wobble a little bit, but it's going to, keep that orientation going in the same direction, the same path.
Yeah, no, that's actually going to be really helpful, because, like we said earlier, with the older version of it, it's going to make the insulin 100% useful, or it's going to be injected completely into the stomach lining, which has a lot of blood vessels surrounding it, a lot of what's the structure that I'm thinking of? It's like capillaries. It has a lot of capillary structures around it that allow it to be injected into the bloodstream a lot more efficiently than it would if you're injecting it directly with a relatively larger dosage, I'm assuming.
And, like, the stomach is pretty much the closest point. Like, the way that they're like injecting this is really the closest point I can think of to be a safe injection point that's close to your heart and close to your internal organs, where it really matters.
That would definitely be that would definitely be a huge benefit in terms of where it's being injected, just from the sense of how, like, what it's closest to in terms of the arteries.
Yeah, and this also has, like, other applications we can think of. Like, they're mentioning immunosuppressants, so they could do rheumatoid arthritis. They could treat that with this.
They could treat rheumatoid arthritis with this, and what else is it saying?
They could also do nucleic acids, like DNA and RNA. So you could do, CRISPR treatments, essentially, with this.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna bring this up. I don't remember actually if we've talked about this in a previous episode or not. But there's this guy that I watched. His YouTube channel is called Thought Emporium. I'm not really sure if that's actually correct or not. But he used a CRISPR treatment. This guy's a biologist he's studied to be a biologist, and he actually was waiting for this technology to come out, this CRISPR technology. And what he's essentially done is used it to solve his lactose intolerance. Pretty much, he genetically engineered an adenosine attenuated virus, I think is what it was called, and he was able to, like, essentially correct his microbiome and allowed bacteria that, or I forget what it was, whether it was bacteria or the stomach lining itself, to help process or produce lactase or process lactose better, to the point where he didn't have the symptoms of lactose intolerance.
That's really cool. Like, that's one of the biggest things I think that this technology could be used for. I mean, sure, you can help with type 2 diabetes, you can help with, other things, but the idea of injecting DNA or anything into your body, that would be an easy method like this, that you could, fix lactose intolerance. There's a whole host of things I think you could fix with this.
Yeah,
I shouldn't say fix, but the whole host of things you could change.
Well, the sort of applications that I could have would be massive. I mean, I remember reading science fiction novels that would have types of gene therapy where people would be hooked up to these systems that are almost basically like chemotherapy chairs, and they're using that for gene therapy 200 years in the future, and instead we can just pop a pill and be able to start changing our own genetics to help benefit us in a way that would be actually, like, hugely beneficial for a specific medical application. That would be huge.
I mean, and it doesn't seem like it'd be that expensive to manufacture. It's going to be, the tip of the needle is made from freeze-dried insulin. The rest of it is, you got a disc of sugar. And then you just have, I'm going to assume it's a biodegradable plastic.
And it's also stainless steel, so it makes it easier to pass through the digestive tract without it being bioreactive and harming other areas of the digestive tract itself, or even potentially being absorbed into the blood and causing either sepsis in the blood or potentially harming other organs inside the body.
I wonder if stainless steel is going to have a re-emergence soon, because we got Starship being made entirely out of stainless steel. I'm seeing stainless steel is, bioneutral. This is really kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, this is actually, I think
it's just an interesting metal.
Yeah, it's biocompatible with a lot of stuff, or bioneutral, as you said, in terms of how it affects the body, because I forget, but it doesn't interact ionically with a lot of stuff. Of course, if you cut someone open and then try and stick a piece of stainless steel on them, of course it's going to cause some kind of infection with it unless you clean it properly. But
I feel like you'd have other issues there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Why would someone be wanting to do that in the first place? But yeah, no, makes it safe to pass through, which means you could potentially give this to children as well with underdeveloped digestive systems as well, because I mean this is way different than swallowing, like, say, a buckyball, for example, or 2 buckyballs, God forbid.
This is safe, actually.
This is actually,
and it dissolves, or it'll pass through, and it's not going to be. It's not something that's going to like impact the digestive system in any way that we can find in this article, at least.
Yeah, because they had initially done tests on pigs, which we found actually have a comparable digestive system to humans.
Yeah, like, so their esophagus is kind of the same length. It goes because it shoves their stomach back near like the back 3/4 of the body. Mm-hmm. So their esophagus is relatively long, and then they have a stomach, small and large intestine. Like, everything looks like the same.
And it's also got the other organs like a liver, pancreas, gallbladder, and other filtering organs like kidneys as well that would be able to basically be comparable to a human. I mean, I would have thought that they used even like chimpanzees. I mean, did they say they started out with rats at all? Because I mean, it's a fairly large pill to be.
I don't think they could do rats. I think they would have started on pigs because they'd have to scale it down for rats, which would be a little difficult, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem with that though is that, like with pigs, even you have a different microbiome, you have a different diet, you have a different level of activity that could be given, that's going to be monitored, that's completely different to humans in terms of their comparable biology. Sure, it has a similar digestive tract, but I mean, what happens when the diet changes? How the change is going to be measured there? I mean, the model might be the same.
I think the thing they were testing there is the delivery method. So, like, the thing is, you can synthesize human stomach acid. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure they've already tested that, and they've tested it in different, values for pH values. But I'm sure for pigs, what they were testing was their actual delivery. Like, can we get it to the stomach? Yes. Can it, like, stabilize itself in the stomach? Yes. Can it actually penetrate the stomach walls? Yes. Does it not miss and go straight out the stomach?
Yeah, I just had never heard of diabetic pigs before. I don't even know if that's a thing. If they'd actually, I mean, I just.
It is interesting that they actually did, deliver insulin into the pigs. Like, it wasn't like a sugar. It was 300 micrograms of insulin.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's comparable insulin for pigs or if they used human synthesized insulin, and if so, why would they be using something like that?
Well, it's a pig.
It's a pig. It's got many uses.
Anyway, I think we should move on to our next article, which, is going to be a little bit interesting because it kind of reminded me. I was starting to think about, like, pigs are the same. Well, pig skin and human skin are really similar.
Yeah.
And what this is the next article is on a fabric that kind of acts like skin in a way.
Well, human skin and pig skin aren't. There's
a thickness difference, I understand.
There's also the fact that they don't sweat.
That's also true.
They roll around a lot in mud to cool themselves off.
Yeah. Anyway,
but still, the idea and the thought track remains to our next article.
I was trying to make a connection.
That still works.
So this is the University of Maryland. Researchers there have engineered a synthetic yarn that is a fabric that's coated with carbon nanotubes, which is activated by temperature and humidity. So what this does is when it heats up and gets humid, it'll actually expand slightly. It'll expand, and the carbon nanotubes will move apart. And what that does is it allows it to radiate heat off. So it'll move heat away from it, and then when it's cold, the whole thing will shrink down, kind of. Now that's really cool because, like, you could have an adaptive shirt. The difference here is they don't mention how much it expands or contracts.
Yeah,
but I was looking into it, and I think that the weave is so tight that it's like millimeter, like not even millimeters. It expands per like gap, so it's probably like in the I don't actually know what's below millimeters.
Micrometers.
Micrometers. So it'd be like in the micrometers of gaps you're getting here.
Yeah.
And that's a change.
Well, I mean, I actually like to. Well, I mean, even if it's not in micrometers or millimeters, even I'd still like to see a video of this material in action, even at a microscopic scale, because that'd just be really interesting to see just how much it. Because it does. I don't think it says in the article how much it, like, what kind of percentage it contracts.
It doesn't mention that, but they do. The only picture they provide is like a foot by foot sample of it they made.
Yeah, I'd actually like to see a video of that if University of Maryland would actually be willing to release something like that. That seems like a really cool thing, just to, because I watch a lot of scientific video stuff in terms of just how new technologies operate. Like there was one I think back in January of 2018 having to do with sort of a what's called like a Hazel actuator. It's basically a capacitor with a kind of material inside of it that's like a polymer that once you apply a voltage, that electrostatic force squeezes the polymer together and it expands. It basically acts like a synthetic muscle almost.
And I mean, this kind of does too, but it's in a different way. So this switches. I mean, they were saying this is the first fabric that switches from porosity to infrared transparent. Like it changes both the porosity and the infrared transparency of itself. So like, and just in response to environment. I mean, we all think of like dry fit stuff for like working out that just wicks sweat away. This would be a whole nother level of that where it pulls it away and like it pulls the heat away from you as well.
Okay, and it says carbon nanotubes are used. Does that? I didn't see.
So it's saying that in the way. So the way they do it is the carbon nanotubes get coated on it like in a carbon layer, and so what it allows is that as it gets warm, it moves apart, right? So it's really hard to explain. Essentially, when you distort the yarn and it brings it closer together, it opens the pores in the fabric. But it also modifies the electromagnetic coupling between the carbon nanotubes and the coating. So you're changing the electromagnet. Like it's really hard to explain for me, but it's changing the way the radiation from your body interacts with the fabric.
Interesting. So there's no like power supply or battery pack that needs to be applied, because whenever I hear carbon nanotubes and this sort of thing happening, I'd always imagine you'd have to have like some kind of power source to help it either set so it senses it by itself.
So essentially they're using the natural conductivity of it, and so when the yarn expands, because the yarn is really one of the bigger things that expands and contracts, the carbon nanotubes pull apart right as it expands, which opens up those gaps, like gives less electromagnetic connection, and you're allowing more radiation to pass through. But if you close that, you're going to let less radiated heat essentially is what they're trying to stop here.
Still radiation.
Yeah, so that's what it's doing.
Interesting. So I always this kind of brings up like I like to see kind of how this whole thing. Well, yeah, kind of see like a video of this, of course. But then kind of see if they use something that's called like the Seebeck Effect. Basically, a difference in hot and cold induces... I forget if there's like a specific kind of ceramic that needs to be used. But basically, if there's a difference between hot and cold, there's a thing called a Seebeck Effect, which basically allows that difference in temperature to generate a voltage. And I wonder if that has anything to do at all with this new carbon nanotube yarn, because that would actually be really interesting for me to find out just how much of that. I wouldn't assume so, considering that I think the Seebeck effect has to take place with some kind of ceramic. But even if that's still not the case, it's still a pretty interesting material to work with in the next 5 to 10 years if it ever gets on a consumer market.
Yeah, and I mean, I was just reading this a little more. It looks like, so yeah, the material that the yarn is made out of, the synthetics, are like they resist and absorb water, right? So when it's absorbed by humidity, it can do its thing and expand. And then that is the motion that will control the carbon nanotubes. And it looks like they're using this in effect that, like, it's like moving antennas to change the wavelength and frequency. So they're changing the resonance frequency of the yarn. So that is what allows it to radiate or not radiate heat away.
Interesting.
So really, it's not the carbon nanotubes. The conductivity there is acting as an antenna, and it's
really?
like so it's acting. It's in that kind of way where you'd have it, when you move them apart, it changes the frequency that would be allowed to pass. And then when you move them together, it once again changes that frequency.
Yeah, that's a little bit too in depth for me. I'm still trying to process all of that. That seems
it's way out of my league too. I'm quoting the article in ways here, but I mean, it's really interesting that like this is a thing now.
Yeah, no, that seems like a really interesting thing that we're gonna have to keep watch of. Just in general, I mean, just imagine this being used in pretty much your like grandma knitting a new sweater almost.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome.
I mean, this stuff definitely has possibility. There's a lot of markets for it. I mean, sports, hiking, camping. I mean, just anything outside or really inside. Like this is a big change, I think, that could happen in the clothing industry.
Yeah, like I know myself, I tend to get extremely just overheated whenever I work out a lot. So it's that I would definitely be buying something like that, even if it was $100, $200. That'd definitely be usable.
Yeah, and I think that, if we need to see carbon fiber and carbon nanotubes, just carbon in general, move forward a little bit before we get this at a mass scale.
Mm-hmm.
But like we were talking about, I think we were talking about this in an earlier episode. If we can find, like the industry can find reasons to invest in carbon nanotubes,
Mm-hmm.
they will. So if they can find something that would turn a profit with it, they'll do it.
Oh, definitely.
And I think this is one of those things that they could possibly find a way to profit highly from this. So this could be, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying it's theoretical that this could probably be a turning point in carbon nanotubes where industry goes, wait, we can make money off that. Let's do it. Let's start, making carbon nanotubes, making this fabric.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could lead to just so many more, doors opening down the line.
Yeah, kind of like what we said in the earlier episode. We're going from a silicon age to a graphene age, almost.
Yeah, so I mean, we need to have some step. And I think things like this, where you're integrating it into clothing, you're integrating it into just daily life, that's where you see that change. That's when things start to make more sense in the industry to produce, for consumers to buy. I mean, we're going to see, I think, a jump in price, and then it's going to slowly decline once we get, like...
a high demand for it and a lot of supply.
Exactly. Well, I think once we get the process down. I mean, right now it's expensive to produce this, but once we speed that up, make it stronger, make it better, make it more reliable, make less waste, then we'll start to see those prices down. And that's when I'm saying, like, I think this could be done in a decade.
Yeah.
Like, if we actually have industry jump on this kind of fabric in the next couple of years, I think that the industry themselves moves so fast that if they get their hands on it and they learn how to do it, in 5 years we'll see the more commonality of it.
Well, then this is my econ brain talking, though, is that you actually need the consumers to want that kind of product, which is just kind of what you were saying. We need to introduce this more into daily life, have this kind of fabric, have what you were talking about with snow skis and whatnot, having carbon nanotubes and graphene and graphite, all this carbon material being integrated more and more to the point where consumers would be more likely to buy something at a higher price because it has carbon in it, where it doesn't seem like a cheap gimmick like with all this. I remember recently there's this whole fad about like carbon powder, essentially like activated charcoal, being used for all these different like pseudo health applications, like brightening your teeth. Like stuff like that seems,
that's gimmicky to me.
Well, it's with the brightening of your teeth, it's actually dangerous because it's an abrasive material that can rub away the enamel.
It's like rubbing a belt sander over your teeth.
Almost
but something
exactly.
Like this, I can see. I mean, it's not harmful. It's really, really useful.
Yeah.
You have no idea how many times. So I ski raced in high school, and we had to wear really tight, like, spandexy, like, weird material suits that were, like, they were nice. But when the wind blew, you were cold. Like, people got frostbite because of these things.
Seriously.
So, like, this kind of thing, I think, would be really cool. You could put this into, like, speed suits and, like, race suits for the Olympics. You wouldn't have athletes having to shed and put on layers all the time.
Yeah.
You could have a consistent layer that, as they started working out, getting a little bit warmer, you could have it, cool them down a little bit. But, I mean, I'm just thinking of so many ways that this could be useful for us as a society that, I mean, it's just really exciting. But, I mean, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this, today's episode. As always, our links are down below for the articles, and all of our social links are down below. Feel free to follow us on Twitter, take a look at our Patreon, see what you could do for us there.
Trying to expand out the dorm studio a little bit so that it doesn't sound as echoey, so we get a little bit of a better quality in terms of the audio for you guys.
Yeah, foam cell, like, packaging material is cheap, but it's not cheap when you have no income.
Yeah.
So, I mean, anything you guys can do to help is always appreciated. And we hope you tune in next week. We don't know what we're talking about, but I'm sure we can make it interesting. As always, I'm Josh.
This is Grayson. Stay creative, and we will see you all next time.